So thrilled to have returning to the show, host of the Blue Jays Happy Hour podcast. He just released his episode today. Andrew Stoeten, welcome back to the Walk-Off, man. Thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely. Anytime, man. Pleased to be here. Wish I had a better team to talk about.
Me too. Me too. And this is a weird way to start it here, but I was sitting with my buddy. He's a Red Sox fan yesterday out of the Maritimes. They can't help themselves. They love the
Mhm.
Red Sox there for whatever reason. And we got into a conversation about players we just don't like. And he's not even on the Red Sox anymore. I just can't stand Alex Verdugo. I know he's a good player. I know he has reasons to be sought after on other teams. I just don't like him. Do you have a guy?
I,
Do you have a guy you can't really back up why, but you just don't like him?
I mean, Verdugo, I think I could back up why. I mean, with whatever went
Okay,
on
there
when he
you
was in
go.
the Dodgers
Yeah, there's
organization, right?
yes.
There are some guys. I try to be more objective now that I mean, it's been a long time since I sort of moved away from pure fandom into like whatever
Hmm.
media thing with like fan branding that I do, or I don't know how best to describe it. So I mean, Verdugo would be a great choice. If you hadn't said that, I might have come up with him. But also, I'm blanking. But no, so I guess I don't have a guy that really strongly comes to mind at the moment.
And you know what? I normally don't. And I the longer I've done the podcast, the more I've tried to lean towards being objective as well. So it's funny that like the fandom just sometimes is tough to knock out of you, you know?
I must say, I will. Craig Kimbrell, when he does that stupid arm dangling thing, it's stuff like
Yeah.
that that gets to me. I try not to think too much about who these guys are off the field, but when
Hmm.
stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah, it
that
normally just disappoints.
yes, it does. Do not know your heroes. Yeah, that's that stuff, that kind of thing. Ugh, get it out of my face.
So, Red Sox, Blue Jays, the Jays have just dropped the series yesterday after a very disheartening loss. Coming off it, and that's what's frustrating too, is Andrew, like an idiot, I let hope creep back in because they played so well against a very, very good Guardians team, taking a
Mhm.
series against a team that wasn't just above 500, but one of the best in all of baseball, scoring 5 runs in back-to-back games. And all of a sudden, my brain started to reset, being like, oh, this infusion of youth from Buffalo. Maybe they can figure it out. And now we're watching exactly what this team has been all season long. Where are you at right now, June 19th, on the Toronto Blue Jays? Are they just going to chase this 500 mark the whole season, or do you see a more hopeful outcome in the end for them?
I mean, it feels like you can't say anything but it's going to be a chase of 500. I mentioned this on my own podcast when we recorded it last night. I've seen people talk about it's reminding them of 2017, which I think was like 9 times they had a chance to get to 500 and they failed all 9 or something like that. This team has a lot more talent than that one did. But yeah, the vibes are very similar, and it's a thing that's sort of across the league, right? I mean, you go looking around, there's what 5 6 really good teams, and then everybody else is in the middle, except for maybe a few that are just abysmal. So I think that's just how it's probably going to end up going. I mean, I think that there are uh, people forget. I mean, and this maybe we'll talk about George Springer and the pinch hit situation
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that, and just how bad he's been going. But I think like he had 4 really above average, like really strong months last year. Now they were not consecutive, and that's just kind of a stupid way to parse it. But I'm not completely, out of the George Springer business, and if that back can get going, I mean, that feels like we've been saying that for so long that it's absurd to think that there's a possibility. But there are still guys. Bo hasn't shown his best yet. Vlad, is doing better things than he was at the start of the year. But I think absolutely, we'd like to see that translate into more power. Or Elvis Martinez is an interesting bat who's up here now,
Mm-hmm.
who at least, I'm skeptical a little bit of how advanced pitching, how he's going to handle that. But
He is
uh,
22, right? Like
he
that is
is,
one
yeah,
thing, all this hope everyone is putting on this kid's shoulders. I mean, he's young.
he's very young. He also had like a 324 on base in AAA.
Yeah.
So, the soft, the breaking stuff, the off speed stuff away. That's going to be tricky for him when he's seeing it at a level where he just hasn't been before. But he can at least pull the ball in the air really hard and yank it over the fence. And you sprinkle a few more of those in throughout the season, and it could have a completely different feel to it, right? I mean, there have been so many games where it's like, man, just a bloop and a blast could have helped them a ton. So there's more to this team, I think. I'm not yet in the mode of looking forward to the final 2 months of the season and really seeing some auditions and maybe seeing
Mm-hmm.
some trades and what all that might come to. Um, but it's not been fun. I mean, it's just that's I think the state of baseball in a lot of markets right now. I mean, I have on Twitter and have fans I follow from all sorts of cities. Like the Cubs are bad.
Mm-hmm.
That's one that that gets loud. Which with a lot of similar problems, just a listless, unwatchable. The offense isn't where it is, and you look at I think it was like Nick Stellini was like talking about filling out his all-star ballot, and he's like, I know offense is down, but when you actually go through and like start trying to make all-star picks and think about it, you look at some of the guys' numbers, and it's especially once you move away from like the league and year adjusted, the weighted runs created plus kind of stuff, or OPS plus, into like the OPS and the home runs and some of that. I mean, it is not a good year for offense, and that's uh, we definitely feel that here, and I think everybody feels it more about their own team. But it really is bad everywhere. So enjoy enjoy Major League Baseball under those conditions. It's not great. I'm not having a great time.
It's been interesting to watch the complete bottom fallout of offense around the league, despite the rule changes trying to enhance that, right? Like the
Mm.
pickoff rule, trying to encourage more stolen bases, trying to eliminate the shift and just have players being able to hit to their strengths. Is like what else can be done? Like I'm almost at a point where like are pitchers just too good, Andrew?
They are very, very good. I think one thing that we've seen in the minor leagues is the automated balls and strike system, right? Which sounds like it's coming, but it's probably not coming even next year. But that seems to have uh, just refined the zone and made it so that I think it's probably advantageous to the hitters. I mean, if you look at some of the numbers in the minor leagues, they've been the offense seems to have been boosted. That's part of the reason, especially like the walks. I think part of the reason that uh I'd particularly like to pump the brakes on anytime a Buffalo guy comes up is like, yeah, you got to look at the league average. Like league average OPS in the International League is certainly higher than in Major League Baseball right now.
Mm-hmm.
So there's another lever to pull. Juice in the ball. Rob Manfred, get on the phone to the Honduran factories or wherever they are. We got to get that wound tighter or whatever it was you were doing a few years
Whatever
ago.
you were doing in 2019,
Yeah,
where guys like
basically.
Daniel Vogelbach were hitting 30 home runs and Kevin Pillar was breaking the 20 dinger mark.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it turns out offense is nice, and you would hear for decades, pitching and defense. That's how you win, and there are things to be
Yeah,
appreciate absolutely in that. Just as a fan of baseball, like I don't mind a low scoring game, but and this is the complaint we had last year too, and it's maybe not been quite the same because they haven't been as purely snake bitten with runners in scoring position or all that same stuff. But it's so tough. It's like you get down 2-3 runs and you start feeling like, how are they going to come back from this? Because they need to string together 5-6 hits to get those runs back, because they're not hitting the ball over the fence, and that's maybe just a Jays problem. There certainly, Aaron Judge doesn't seem to be having any problems with the baseball. Shohei Ohtani doesn't have any problems with the baseball, but when you take out the generational talent type guys, then it is a bit of a slog. Yeah, it's something that should be addressed, and they have, like you say, Brady, banning the shift, making stolen bases easier, doing all those things. Their intention is to have more run scoring to improve the offensive environment, and it just has not worked.
we've brought up the Buffalo Boys numerous times here. Addison Barger, Aroldis Martinez just called up yesterday. Ernie Clement, Davis Schneider, Spencer Horowitz, all taking up spots on this 26-man roster. And it's funny, I'm excited about it. I am. And I know I've got to go down to Buffalo the last couple months here a few times and check out the team and report on them. And it is an exciting thing to watch these guys make that jump. But I'll be honest, man, if you were to hop in a time machine and come and see me April 1st and be like, hey, guess what, Scott? We've got 5 guys from the Bisons taking up spots on this team. My first reaction would be to panic, right? I'd be
Mm-hmm.
like, what has happened? What injuries are there? Is George Springer all right? The answer to all of those is no injuries almost at all. And no, he is not. can you put a positive spin on the fact that we're relying on these AAA guys? I know it's fantastic to see guys make that jump, and definitely we needed to see, especially out of guys like Horowitz, who's 27 years old in
Mhm.
in a month. You need to see what they got, but in a desperation to get offense, I don't know if that's the way you want to see it.
No, absolutely not. And that's been the thing. I think it's been tough for the Blue Jays to break in younger players, and this is an opportunity to do that. It's just an opportunity in the worst way possible because you are desperate, right? And I think a lot of like they take a lot of heat, and rightly so, for drafting and developing, and that's been an issue, especially on the top end. There are no Jackson Holidays or Gunnar Hendersons showing up anytime soon. You got some guys in the low minors that you're kind of intrigued by, but even that's so far off. So it's good to see, unless you're like really really cynical and want everything to fail so that everybody loses their job, which I can understand. Sometimes people may be taking that burn it to the ground point of view. I think that's probably misguided. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think that there's much of an appetite for a huge rebuild and going dark for a couple years, but we'll talk about
So
that
let's
when the
let's
time
let's
goes.
dig into that a
Okay,
little
we
bit
can. Okay,
here. Yeah,
sure.
let's dig into that a little bit here because I kind of do agree with you that I look at this team like I'm 42. I don't want to go through a 5 to 10 year span where baseball's just not even fun to watch. Because I'm
Mhm.
an idiot and I will still sit there and watch it. But uh at the same time, you see the success that some of these teams like Baltimore who have just done the whole tear down type of model and it's showing fruit. That said, there's teams that do it and do it wrong. And I worry that the Jays could wind up just being that 2000 to 2012 team, right? Where it's
Yeah.
just like 12 years of meh.
Yeah.
Do you think that this team has the assets to do a retool and maybe next year is still a struggle, but they can kind of recalibrate and get back on the right track in a reasonable amount of time, being a year or so?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't think that that's necessarily trade assets, but I think that you look at the money that's coming off the books. You look at where
Mhm.
they have a lot of older guys. They have guys who, if they play this trade deadline right, which they right is I guess open to interpretation.
Yes.
But they could certainly help next year's team by closing up shop early, and selling off guys like Kikuchi, Jimmy Garcia if he comes back well, Danny Jansen. You can get real things for those guys who can be helpful to you, right? Like look at even just what the Jays gave up last year for Jordan Hicks. I think is a good example of like a couple high minors pitchers with like maybe higher floors than ceilings, but and guys who needed to be added to the 40 man. But those are guys that probably would have liked to have back at this point,
Yeah.
right? I mean, for all that Jordan Hicks did for you, even though he was really good, and it was good to see them make that trade and actually try to take advantage of the fact that they were in a playoff spot, which I think you have to do. But also I look at the money. As long as Rogers continues to invest to not catastrophically low levels of payroll. Like I don't know if I'll expect them to continue to be a luxury tax team after a year like this, and going forward with what they're projected to be in terms of like where guys contracts drop off. I expect they'll take a run at Juan Soto this winter. I don't know if it's going to make a difference. I mean, that's a tough sell, especially with him being so clearly above the rest of the market. But I think that, I mean, like look, you're trying to the Yankees are really good. The Orioles are really good. They might be. It's a tough ask to say let's be better than those teams, but you can be better than the Red Sox and the Rays really quickly. You maybe are
Hmm.
right now. You can be better than the Royals. You can better, the Mariners. I don't really rate the Mariners. The Astros are in a trough. Like that middle. I don't know that any of those teams have guys like Orioles level prospects kind of coming up, and you don't necessarily need that. But like I don't think that the bar is super high there in terms of being able to have a competitive team that can genuinely look like it can get into the playoffs, where you can Diamondbacks your way to a great playoff run. And I think I kind of hate that that's what the mindset is
Yeah.
probably going to be, and is going to be in a lot of markets. And I think the fact that they've added a playoff team has made it that way. I do like that
Do you
we'll
think
be.
this edition of the playoff team has actually done the opposite of what they were trying to do, which is make things a little less competitive, and so that middle slog can get away with, having their fan base
Yeah,
engaged in mediocre baseball?
I think a lot of people were saying at the time that was going to be the case, and I remember being like, yeah, that seems plausible, but also the Jays are in such a tough spot in the AL East. I don't care. Give me an extra
Yeah.
playoff spot. And I do stand by that. But yeah, it would be nice. It would be nice if there was more incentive to win the division and that teams were actually taking it. It does seem like a lot of teams are not, I was going to say happy to be in the middle, which I don't know that that's true. And especially you look at the payroll the Blue Jays are running, like that's not. I don't think there's expectation from ownership that they're going to be, the third wild card team. Right? I think that they, like, there is a genuine commitment to trying to be better than what the product has been. I don't know if I can say that for every other market, and yeah, where it's going to go, I suspect that it'll level off, and you'll have a lot of teams that are happy to only spend enough to be in that middle conversation, and that is going to be a problem because it's not particularly entertaining or fun to watch a team that's 500. It's just
Yeah.
not.
So a few things you've said has stood out to me. So let's go back and talk. I know you mentioned the assets that they could move if that's the direction they wish to go. Let's say this team is still around 500 come the All-Star break. Do you think that this front office has it in them to move some of these assets, or at least maybe go the Jerry Dipoto Mariners way of yeah, you're moving one guy, you're still trying to stay competitive, bringing usable players back the other way and retool on the fly type of thing, like the Seawald for Rojas type of deal?
I think that they probably do. I mean, I think a lot of people think they're very conservative front office when I would quibble with that in a
Yeah,
lot of cases. I think you just you have to look at it in a different way sometimes. It was not it was risky to bet to double down on their roster. Like that's a huge risk that they took,
yeah.
but I don't think a lot of people like frame it that way. So yeah, they could do some interesting things. We haven't seen a ton of that from them. It's been more sort of straight up we're buyers or we're sellers. Um, it would be interesting. I think there's like a dynamic in the room that they have to be, more cognizant of, especially because they haven't been that kind of team. Um, maybe what you're going to get when you're playing for Jerry Dipoto than when you're playing for Ross Atkins. But I think
A
that's
goal of
one.
54% wins.
Well, that's everybody's goal now at this point. It
Yeah,
really feels like that was a real mask off
because it
moment.
works. It's
Yeah,
sad, but that's where we're at.
yeah, it's I hate not being able to be more positive about the sport that I love and that I cover for a living and that I would like other people to be
Yeah.
having a fun time watching, but it's hard. That kind of quote is tough. You want everybody to be trying their best to win every single year. That's what the whole thing is about. And yeah, it's 54% is just so low too. Like
I know, right? It's
if
just
it's
like,
at like 65, like okay, I
I'd be
can
like,
understand
okay,
you're
yeah.
realistic, you're gonna lose some, but 54% is just, I mean, that's unbelievable. Not unbelievable that they think that, but that they would say it is wild. But yeah, I'm really curious to see how they play the trade deadline. I think, 2 months of the season left by the end of July. Like that's so much baseball. If you're
It
still
is.
hanging around that third wild card spot, it would be, I think a lot of people would like feel cathartic about it if they just blew things up and admitted, okay, this team isn't good enough. It's not going to work. And all you got to do is hit like an 8 game winning streak, and you're like you're in the driver's seat, like which is a lot to do, but these are things that happen. They're not incapable of a streak like that, and they're not incapable of an 8 game losing streak either. It's just it would be so tough to watch them give up on the potential playoff spot, and then
It is.
because what are they going to get next year, or what are they going to get out of this trade deadline that's going to make them that much better
Hmm.
next year that they can't just do by making a few smart signings and reallocating some of their money and maybe eating some of the bulkier contracts on the payroll and being willing to say goodbye to George Springer some point next summer, stuff like that.
The thing that stood out to me, you talked about the fact that Danny Jansen could be one of those guys. Obviously, his contract is, or not contract, but his control is up basically at the end of this season, and it would be up to this front office to extend him if he's going to stay in the fold, or who knows, go and bring him back in free agency. That's another option here. I bring up Danny Jansen because this team went from being an embarrassment of riches with young, under control catchers only a couple years ago to now we're kind of in a
Yeah.
weird situation where you're like, listen, if Danny Jansen leaves, this team is going to need to go out and get a catcher. There isn't really anything in the minor league system coming up that's major league ready anyways. Where does this team go from here? I don't even know how to frame this because it is such an interesting conundrum for them to be in, especially considering Jano's been with this organization since 2013. He knows the pitching staff inside and out. He knows the organization inside and out. He's finally that guy who you can put veteran in front of. And everyone needs one of those guys, especially if you're going to be a competitive contending team. Where does this front office go?
Yeah, that's a tough one because I mean, Kirk has been not the same guy that he was in the first half of 2022 for so that's for a while. And that's
Andrew, do you
definitely
think, not to interrupt, do you think
sure.
it's just the league figured him out and he's just never been able to kind of readjust?
I honestly don't
Or
know.
do
I
you
don't
still
know.
believe? Give me hope in Kirk.
I mean, I haven't looked at the exit velocities right now, but I mean that was sort of the thing. Like he was hitting piss rods for a while, right? Like he was a guy who came up and could really strike the baseball, and you just don't see that. You see so much soft contact away. You see so many pop ups. I'd have to really drill down into some numbers to have a clearer like thought on it, but I have to assume. I mean, look, I know everybody will. This is a guy where people will zero in on his body, and that's that's just the nature of things. I try to not do stuff like that, but he is a bigger guy, and you wonder about things like bat speed. It seems like it would. He seems like he's just so young for like physically to be falling apart. But also, it's a really demanding physical position too, and they threw him into the fire very quickly. Like we see with
Mm-hmm.
Jansen outwardly, because he ends up on the IL a lot with broken things. But like it is a tough position to play, and if your strength is sapped in certain ways, I can understand why that's not. Why it's just not possible for him to be the kind of hitter that he was when he was like just had so much less wear and tear on him. So it might not even
Mm-hmm.
be about like what he physically looks like, which is good because I don't like getting into that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say about that. I think that he's definitely he looks better when he has that Jansen kind of partnership there where he can take more time off. I think you definitely kind of notice it when Jansen's out and Kirk has to really carry the load, that it's been tougher for him. Um, I
And
don't know. I
that's not
still
even
think
specific to Alejandro. It's pretty
true.
tough in today's game to carry the load, be that guy 4 out of 5 games, 5 out of 6
Yeah.
games.
There are not that many of those guys around, especially who like are at Sal Perez is having a good year. Real Muto's
Yeah.
always good, but like at that kind of offensive level, the kind of offensive level that we expect from Kirk, it's really really tough. And to his huge credit, like he has become a really good defensive catcher, right? Like the framing has been good, which that skill might be about to
On the way
evaporate.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, but he blocks balls well. He does things that are more subtle than controlling the running game super well, he's you look at the defensive metrics, he's been a really really valuable catcher defensively, which has kept I think will keep him valuable and make him a guy who yeah, you probably want a second catcher to go with him. Maybe hits from the left side, but you're kind of not even that at that point. You're like asking for a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's a position where you're probably not going to get a ton of offense going forward, and that's true for a lot of teams. And I don't think that would be the priority when they have a guy who cannot be a great bat, but can at least field the position beyond more than competently, like maybe even at an elite level defensively, which is that's probably too strong, but he's been really good. So I'm not super worried about him sort of if you sort of step back and look at what the position is like. But yeah, you would really like to see them have another option. A guy very much like Danny Jansen would be nice for the Blue Jays to have going forward. Like that is
So,
a thing that they should really consider doing.
with all of that said, if you, Andrew Stoeten, were in charge of the Toronto Blue Jays, are you putting some serious effort into trying to bring Danny Jansen back?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, I don't know what incentive he has to sign a contract this close to free agency. Well, he's going to
Yeah,
come
because
and he's going to be one of the
everything you just said, Jano knows. You
yeah.
know, like he
He's going to
knows his
be
value. Yeah.
who else is on the board too? Like I mean, man, I don't want to see him banging doubles and homers over the green monster or something stupid like that.
Oh.
But there are places like that where I could see Jano being a well liked guy, and you would you'd hate to lose him, but it's gonna take a real offer. It's gonna take a real offer, um, and that's gonna be tough. I would honestly I would try to do it. I don't know if you're ready for well they weren't ready 2 years ago for a catcher that was too young, or a year and a half ago for for
Mm-hmm.
Moreno to really break him in, even though Kirk is really young too. And maybe this is an opportunity to go and trade for somebody, or find somebody uh who can be the next Jano. But that's tough when he's right there, and you're throwing money at Kiermaier and Justin Turner and George Springer, and if you can't find enough money for Danny Jansen, because he seems really like, yeah, like you say, a really important part of the team, even though it's not a great team. I think he's doing his job.
So we have talked George Springer a little bit. Um, I mean, since May 1st, he's hitting 183 with a on base of 284 and a slug of 256. And honestly, Andrew, his numbers full season aren't all that much better.
No.
They really aren't. And I know he's been making adjustments. I know he's been trying to change some things with very little success over the last 4 months of those attempts. This offense, when they score 3 runs, they win 75% of the time, which the more I look at those numbers, the more I'm just like, what the fuck is life? Like, where are we at? Like, honestly, if you were to just tell me this in 2022, that all we had to do to win 75% of games was score 3 runs, I'm like, this is a 100-win team.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are with a pitching staff, and we are going to get into some speculation here, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on how the pitching staff deals with this mentally, because this has got to be a real matzo ball for them to overcome. I mean, Chris Bassett, this is his last 6 starts, Andrew. 36 innings pitched, 36 Ks, an ERA of 1.5. The Blue Jays records in these starts, 3-3, and he's lost 3 in a row. I
It's
know
yeah.
we've hit a point, right, where general managers and front offices obviously look at FIP and they look at the peripheral stats, and they understand that sometimes offenses. So it probably, I guess what I'm saying, it's probably not going to affect his value, but just in the right now, these guys have got to be holding their tongue a lot of times.
You have to, yeah, you kind of feel that, I think, too. Bassett in particular doesn't exactly hide his emotions, and you could
No,
I think Atkinson wanted
his
his
poker face is bad. Yeah.
it's very, very bad. And I mean, Atkins was like, he's never met a guy more competitive, basically, than Bassett, which you love, but also, yeah, you kind of are waiting for him to go
When
off.
the team's not competitive, that sucks, though. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously they have to be able to compartmentalize it, and it's like they can only do what they can do, what they're asked to do. A lot of them are doing it. I mean, the bullpen hasn't looked as great lately. It
No.
hasn't been all sunshine on the pitching side, but and I did at one point, a few weeks back, I thought, oh, okay, maybe we're going to actually start talking about some of the weaknesses on the pitching side about this team, because maybe the offense is getting bad. And it's like,
But
no,
the
no, no,
offense
it's the
won't give us a
offense.
chance to
No,
do
they
that.
won't. They won't. It's like I can't go out here and drag Nate Pearson for whatever's
Yeah.
going on with him when George Springer is hitting the way that you're talking about. I mean, that's just such a bigger problem. And yeah, they must be holding their tongues. So I think that's they've all been on bad teams too.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough though, because it's not just a bad team; it's a bad team with like much higher expectations.
Yeah. Coming from the A's and then to the Mets and then going to the Jays, eh? You just got to be like, man, what is my life? Like, what is the luck that I have here? Uh, Chris Bassett is an interesting trade piece. Now we're really diving into the
Mm.
speculation here, but he does have another year on his contract. He is owed $20 million. And like you just stated, is one of the more competitive guys around baseball. and he's never won. Is there, I mean, we always have been talking about Yusei Kikuchi because he's the guy
Mm-hmm.
who is a free agent at the end of the year. Is there a scenario where a team might be able, for the right package, to convince the Jays to part with Bassett, or would this team really would the bottom need to fall out of this team before that's even a real option?
I tend to think so. Yeah, I mean they're gonna need someone to pitch for them next year, right? They're good. There's going to be a Kikuchi sized hole in the rotation as it is, unless they get that deal signed. Which, again, why would he do that? That's he's going to have a really nice market. I believe Scott Boras is his agent too. So, unfortunately, that's probably not in the cards, which sucks because Kikuchi is just such a great character and has pitched
He
so well
is.
after coming back from that disastrous first year. Like to sit here and be like, oh, by the way, Kikuchi, he's beloved, and people are mad that he's not getting extended when here, as he enters his or he as he's in his final year of that contract. To think of where we've come with him is amazing. And he's drinking the whiskey, he's reading all them books, he's sleeping 40 hours a night. Like, uh, you can't not like him, and that kind of stinks. But yeah, I think that like having that much of a hole, having a Manoa sized hole now in the rotation as well. I mean, it would have to take a lot because I think you can't put it all on one player. But I mean, if you're giving up Bassett at this point, you need to get innings coming back, and then you're kind of diminishing the quality that you get. I don't know if it makes sense.
Especially with the amount of innings
Yeah,
he pitches, like 200 last year. He's on
yeah.
pace to break 180 this season. It's impressive what they got out of Chris Bassett so far.
It's been really good. I mean, the pitching side of things has been really good. They've managed to hire smart people on the pitching side, and it feels sometimes like on the other side they have not done quite as well.
Player development, and it's no secret, without a doubt, the biggest Achilles heel of this front office since Shapiro and Atkins has taken over. They have developed talent. They've traded a lot of that off. And this is one thing that maybe gets lost sometimes is that they always people just, because everyone is so frustrated with Atkins and Shapiro right now, some of the stuff that they have done well gets thrown to the wayside, and they have managed to move prospects that haven't really been shining stars elsewhere and bolster their roster, but they have given up a lot of minor league talent to do so. Now, we did just talk about the Buffalo Boys and the fact that there are literally 5 guys from the Bisons on this team right now from a year ago, which also says that there is some player development happening here.
Exactly.
What everyone is concerned about is it's the top end talent, the Ricky Tiedemans, the Orelvis Martinez, because after that, there's a pretty big gap between those 2 guys and the next highly touted prospect.
Yeah, I,
Is
I think it's
is
especially
this,
on the hitting side. Yeah,
yeah, especially on the hitting side. So I'm curious. Obviously, there's some luck to developing these guys and having dudes that pan out from the 4th or 5th or 6th round and become stars. Is Ross Atkins on the hot seat? All of this to say, all of this to say, the crowd, the audience, the fans, they are done with Atkins. But is there a scenario where we're talking in a year from now, Andrew? And I'm asking you the same question.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, as long as Mark Shapiro's there, I think Atkins has a shot to stick around. I mean, I that wouldn't be how I would play it if I was Mark Shapiro. I would not go down with that particular ship. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking about my legacy here and what I can still do as long as I'm still in that job, like I don't see how. And he values stability, so that maybe will be one of those things uh, that helps tip the balance. I think it probably did last winter, right? I mean, people were ready to throw him out last winter. The communication thing has I've not been as aghast by some of the stuff. Like I think a lot of times people get mad about how he communicates and what he says just because
Mm-hmm.
he's not doing PR effectively enough to them about things that they already like. They
Yeah.
understand that he's not going to throw guys under the bus, or he's not going to fall on his sword, and I think people kind of get ridiculous about that sometimes. But also there have been you know, documented issues with communication along, you know, for along the line or along the way, more than once, right? You know, they made a central point of last season, or the transition from last year into this about, you know, we ought to be more effective at communicating with our players in terms of like how we're preparing for games and, you know, letting them know if they're going to get yanked in the third inning, a playoff game and stuff like that. Um, so I mean, I think that there are definitely, I would love to see a fresh pair of eyes. I don't know if you need to completely blow up everything that they're doing, but it would be, I'm with, I would assume the majority of fans in that sense, and I would be,
Yeah.
if I'm Mark Shapiro, whatever loyalty I have and value of stability, I think that, you know, just getting that in, but it would be a really, I think, really smart to do, but also I don't know how big, like, you know, what part of how many other serpent heads the organization has, right? Like how much would changing Atkins even do? You know, they talk about the collaborative process. We know that there's, you know, it's sort of a real team effort, and yeah, so maybe you do need to blow it all up. Is the thing, if it's not producing the results that you want, which
Mm-hmm.
is it's so weird though too, because you know they've got it right this year on the pitching side. They had it right last year on the pitching side, and the hitting side previous years they've been able to get it right. You feel that they should be able to in the same year get that right, and it's just never lined up for them. And I think you're absolutely bang on about, you know, there's a lot of good stuff that they've done that kind of doesn't get acknowledged. I think even on the player development side, I mean, people are really upset that they haven't, you know, what are you going to play? Are you going to produce like 4 all-stars from picking 24th every season? Like, you know, it's going to be that stuff does have a big element of luck, and that stuff does have to take time. I mean, the player development complex, it's been 3 years now, 4 years now, and that's
Mm-hmm.
sort of, you know, that's I think that's something that they're going to have to grow into. I think that will ultimately be something that can help drive them to better things, uh, but yeah, it feels like it hasn't been very good, and you know, you kind of, I think a lot of that is also colored by some disappointing draft classes, and also it kind of overlaps with frustrations that fans have on the at the top level, like, oh, they're really drafting for like contact over power, and thinking like, oh, the hit tool is hard to find or hard to teach. You know, you have to be able to hit for contact first, and then the power kind of, you grow into it.
Mm-hmm.
Which there's some, you know, there's some basis for that theory for sure. Um,
That's the
but it
thing
just
though,
doesn't, it
Andrew.
doesn't
There
have the
is
results,
there
right?
is a basis for literally
Yeah,
every theory that they're doing. Like they
yeah.
are a very thorough organization. It's just I don't know if some of these theories are working out in the end and if they're capable of taking those losses and taking those lumps and learning from them, because they seem very strong-headed about, and again, this is all speculation. This is just me watching them perform and talk and what they have put on the field, right? So
Mhm.
it is easy to get frustrated when you don't see the results that you as a fan want. But I'm kind of at this weird point where I'm like, if a retool rebuild starts going, I don't want Ross Atkins at the helm of it. You only get one. We're not playing baseball. This isn't three strikes here. This is like you get one rebuild. If it doesn't work out, next guy.
Yeah, no, a fresh set of eyes, please. Someone
Yeah.
from outside the organization, please. Not, everybody likes to point to James Click, who really did well in Houston, who's there
Mm-hmm.
now. It's like, no, look, someone from a different tree of the industry, someone who has a fresh perspective that hasn't been, you know, as loud here as it has for a while. Someone who can come in and say, like, what are you doing? Like, that I think is what's necessary. And uh you know, I don't know how much change or how quickly that could be, or even how necessary it really is. But yeah, it's hard to it's hard, it would be hard to take the idea of, you know, continuing down this path and hoping for things to get better, even if they might. It's just
Mm-hmm.
the consumer confidence is so low. You know, I don't know if we're that last year when JP Ricciardi was allowed to like twist in the wind, that was pretty bad.
Yeah.
um I don't people don't like to remember that they were in a similar place with Alex Anthopoulos until about the trade deadline of 2015 as well. A lot of people were in that spot, um, but I think this is worse than that, and maybe just slightly not as bad as the Ricciardi era's last couple of years, which were really rough.
They put a lot of their eggs in the positive regression basket going into this season.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been honestly pretty shocking to me how much that has failed. Uh, I really didn't see the bottom falling out of Bo like it's had this season. And again, this is all speculation. You're just reading facial expressions. A lot of people say that he seems checked out. I don't know if that's the case or if just when you're in the biggest slump of your career, it's really freaking hard to look like you're having a good time. Where are you at, Andrew, on Bo Bichette? And to further that question too, if come the off season, this team has to make a decision on one or the other, and Vladdy seems a little bit more resigned to re-sign in Toronto, and Bo has stated that. Again, this is all I'm setting up a scenario here for you. Let's say Bo has said, you know what, thank you so much, but I'm going to test free agency no matter what. This team has to move him, right? Am I wrong in thinking that way? Like, I know what a value he is, but to watch him just walk and get a round 4 compensatory pick, I don't know if I could stomach that. Where are you at on Bo Bichette? Do you think his value is still high? And if he has stated that he's not coming back, does this team have to move him?
I don't know about have to, but obviously, I think that would be the smart play, right? I mean, you do want to get something for him, and also, I mean, was he a 2-win shortstop at this point? Like, I think there are guys out there who can give you the value that he's giving you this year, which isn't to say that his ceiling isn't much higher. And yeah, I mean, we heard the checked out stuff 2 years ago when I think he was like,
Yeah.
it was early August. He had a 103 weighted runs created plus. Like he had a rough year and then really turned it all around in the last couple of months. Another reason to kind of think, maybe don't be so willing to check out at
Yeah.
the trade deadline. But yeah, I think that he's the one who's much easier to value too, right? I mean, Vlad, he's going better now, but like there's a scenario with Vlad where you tie that compensation pick around him, and that might be tough. You might end up getting him back on a pillow contract. Like that's probably not the case, but he's really tough to value. Like and I think teams would be willing to give him some money and see the raw power and think they can fix him, but that doesn't necessarily make it a market that is going to be super interesting to him, especially with teams going to have to give up draft picks to do that. Like I think Bo is just more straightforward. You've seen what the track record is overall. I think you can get more out of the bat. You see that the defense is passable, and maybe he gets paid like a second baseman. Maybe he probably should have been being a second baseman the whole time, but um, I just think he's much more straightforward to value, so that makes him easier to trade of the two. And if he says he's not coming back, yeah, I think you probably have to think about what that can do, like, and what you can get back for him, and how you can replace his value. And which this,
Yeah.
when you look at just his value this year, he's been a 4-5 win shortstop for a while, which is not easy to do, but also not a 6-7 win shortstop. And
Mm-hmm.
especially if you have a guy with a bit of a glove and you take a downgrade on the bat. I mean that sounds insane considering the problems with this team. You would have to fill in some offense elsewhere, but I think you can manage that and not take a huge hit. Whereas Vlad, you're giving up so much ceiling because you just think he can be so much more. And for
That's where
me,
I'm at too.
I've gone back and forth on this over the years, but for me,
Yeah,
like
me too.
Vlad's kind of the guy who I easy to say when Bo's in a terrible slump, but Vlad I think is the guy who I would still look most to tie my wagon to.
And maybe I'm a little delusional because I have this idea of like, he's still young, he's 25, maybe a pillow contract can be the most beneficial thing for both parties between the Blue Jays and him
Mhm.
because maybe we can sign him back up for 3 years. He hits free agency at 28. It gives him a chance to put up those power numbers again. That is what's going to really get him paid. It's not like there isn't a huge value to a 300 average hitter with an 850 OPS and all of the stuff. I know he's not even there yet, but like 780 OPS, whatever it is, it's above average.
This year
Like
it sure is, yeah.
there is value. There is
Yeah.
value to Vlad as he is right now. But I think that even he recognizes to get paid the big money that he thought was coming his way after his 2021 season, that he's going to need to probably prove it a little bit here. And maybe a pillow deal is the way to do it with his youth.
Yeah, I mean, it would be tough to take away. You don't want to get underpaid for your free agent years up to like 28, 29, right? I mean, he's younger than Adley Rutschman, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Like those are such valuable years. So, he's doing all the things right except putting the ball over the fence right now. That could still come. I don't know. The And yeah, we've seen it in batting practice for years, right? Like there is power in that bat. It just needs to stop using the damn biggest part of the ballpark, right? Or some of those lasers need to be elevated a little bit more. Is like it's there. So maybe I'm wrong in that teams would shy away, but I think it would be so hard to pay him like an MVP kind of guy when he's had like he was a 1-win first baseman last year, and this year he's looking okay. He's the best first baseman by WAR in the American League right now. The All-Star thing, even though he's only got 7 home runs, and that's not a guy you're going to pay like the 2021 version.
Yeah.
And so what will he want to do with that? Like he probably won't want to get locked into a 10-year deal where he's not getting the value out of that where he should. So maybe you got to get creative. Maybe you have to have options or escalators or things like that. But um, yeah, there should be a way to do that. Whereas the Bo thing, it's easy to be down on him, and he's been playing hurt, and he was hurt sort of
Yeah.
last year at the end of the year too. I have a lot of time for Bo, and hope he can turn around. And we've seen it year after year. The numbers do come in at about the same rate as they always do. 125 weighted runs created plus or thereabouts, and 4 or 5 wins. Like that's a really really good player. I don't want to be too blasé about
No, for sure.
but the way he's played this year is it's easy to think, yeah, maybe Leo Jimenez can give you 2 wins, and that's not even going to be that much of a downgrade.
Addison Barger, Orelvis Martinez, Spencer Horwitz, and Davis Schneider. Who do you think of those four prospects that have in the last year been brought up? I'm leaving Ernie Clement out. We'll just put him to the side for now. But of those four, who do you think is going to pan out as the best player in his major league career? I
I
know
mean,
total speculation and guessing here.
at the moment it has to be David Schneider, I think, right? I mean, and he would have been, a year ago, I would have been probably less on that train, but he keeps hitting. He's done really well. It hasn't been perfect. He hasn't come in and been, the savior for this offense like he kind of felt at times last year, especially in those first couple of weeks. But he's absolutely, been an above average Major League
Yeah.
Baseball hitter. Like he can be. You can have David Schneider on a very good baseball team and playing regularly, I think. And Martinez has a higher ceiling for sure, and he's still so young. And there's still, if he really, if that development continues to come and he continues to grow against right-handed pitching and he continues to get better at recognizing pitches and swing decisions and all that, the power will carry him for a long way, I think. So he, ceiling wise, it's definitely Orelvis, like as a hitter. I mean, I think all of them are not particularly good defensive players, which is maybe another issue, even though uh I'm sick of glove first players, frankly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's where I'm at. I think the other guys are really interesting too. Like Barger's bat speed is really good, and
Yeah.
there's a lot that could still come there. Horowitz just keeps hitting too, right? He's been a machine in terms of hitting, and
His on
he's
base
the older
percentage,
guy and doesn't.
I know it doesn't
Yeah,
translate directly AAA to, but it has in a super small sample size. But I've been impressed. The guy
yeah.
gets on base.
I feel like if the Rays had a guy like that, you'd be like, oh, that's a perfect Rays player. He doesn't hit
Yeah.
a ton of home runs, but he's just always on base. He does, you could play him at other positions if you have to. Like it's a Raysy kind of profile there, and he's older, and he's like he's going to be too old to get real money
Yeah.
when he actually reaches free agency. So that's a great fit for them.
Great
Um,
fit.
which in a lot of ways, the Blue Jays have kind of looked at the Rays, I think, and looked at them enviously and followed a lot of their things. Kevin Kiermaier's here for goodness sakes, and like,
Yeah.
uh, the defense thing, the not being as interested in pure power and looking at contact. And I don't know if those are just like if it's as simple as directly importing those kind of ideas from there, but you kind of see some similarities. And then also you see the Rays falling flat this year for many similar reasons and being like, okay, maybe paying this much money to be a version of the of the Rays at their worst is not the way to go about it. But Horowitz certainly would fit if that's their aim.
Orelvis Martinez. He's not with this team all year, is he?
I mean, I hope he is. I hope he hits enough
Me
that they
too.
have no choice. But yeah, I would be very surprised. I think if Bo comes back, also Joey Votto's on his way, which is going to
Yeah.
be interesting, at least from a fan entertainment standpoint. I don't know what I expect out of the bat. Probably not a lot, but
He'll fit right in here.
yeah, willing to find out. Willing to find out. Can't hurt having another guy like that. I mean, carried Dan Vogelbach for so long. Like, why you can't? You could certainly give Joey Votto a long, long look. But yeah, Martinez. Like I say, yeah, I hope he's here. I hope he hits well enough. I hope they find that uh, that he hits enough home runs that they just can't get that bat out of the lineup. They have to keep using, and he's going to mash lefties, which has been an issue for them. And he's going to mash
Mm-hmm.
fastballs probably as well, which has been an issue for the team as well. So that he does check some boxes for them, but it's going to be interesting, especially after like the first couple of games go. We saw that he performed so well in spring training a couple years ago, and every time we've seen him in the spring, it's been pretty good, recognizing pitches and looking like he's ready. And then he's got especially 2 years ago or 3 years, I can't even remember. He's been around so long and is yet still so young. But it was like, oh, he's ready to, and they sort of aggressively promoted him to Double A, and he fell on his face a bit and had to, reestablish himself as a prospect. But that does just say that he's there may be a transition period, and it may not come right away. He might be able to handle himself, or pitchers might not understand how to game plan him as well as they could after a week or so. So I'm not gonna be cheering from the rooftops if he comes out and has a really hot first week, because I think it could still be a slog for him.
Mm-hmm. I
But
think
I
it
hope
will
not.
be. I think it will
Yeah.
be. But I do have, you know what? I actually like that he struggled so mightily in Double A when he first got called
Mhm.
up, because there is something to be said for overcoming adversity and knowing that you do have a next level, you
Mhm.
know? So
Looking forward to seeing where he plays also. Where
yeah, yeah,
uh
absolutely. And this team hasn't had a cleanup hitter in 2 years, like a real
no.
cleanup hitter.
Yeah.
Sure would be nice to have a dude who could hit some bombs, even if he's dragging a 200 batting average behind him. If he's hitting dingers, I'm all for it.
Please, would like to see that very much. Yeah. Uh can make it just make such a huge difference. It really, that's been the most striking thing that we did not learn last year, apparently, is that yeah, no, the odd home run here and there really, especially when, like, just when your pitching staff has been so good and every game is like the finest of margins, just adding those little runs. Tyler O'Neill on Tuesday night, they're like, come on. The Jays, when have the Jays had a performance like that? And they take everything else out of O'Neill's game, and it's still huge. Is because it's just
Yeah.
runs have been so hard to come by, and home runs are instant runs. It's a real simple principle that they seem to have gotten too far away from.
Andrew, really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show, man. It's always nice catching up and talking some baseball with you. Figured we'd end on talking a little Willie Mays. Passed away
Sure,
yesterday, 93 years old, uh, 24 All-Star appearances. I mean, truly
insane.
one of the greats in baseball, a 302 lifetime average, 660 home runs, 3,283 hits. I mean, the guy is so the question for you is he on your Mount Rushmore of baseball players? Is he a top 4 guy in your mind?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I would say
Me
so
too.
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
Me
also,
too.
I mean, there've been a lot of great players, but also,
Yeah, there is. That's the thing. It is a
you
tough.
add you add elite center field defense there. He
Yeah.
also missed a year to military service early in his career, which would have
Yeah,
padded those
12
numbers
gold
even more.
gloves. That's right.
Yeah, that's pretty hard to find somebody you could call better than that. Yeah.
All right. Let's end it
All
on
right.
that. Thank you so much, Andrew. Really appreciate it, and all the best.
You too. Yeah, appreciate you having me, and happy to do it anytime.